Qual é o seu nome?
Pilar.
Esse é o cabeceiro que você falou.
There are few things in life that bring people together quite as much as food. Think about your last meal. Who did you share it with? What was said around the table? With each breaking of bread and slurping of soup, we're taking in much more than calories. And the role of the chef is changing too. Beyond the exploding world of molecular gastronomy, Michelin stars, Instagram and celebrity status, there are those taking on the role of social activist, venturing beyond their restaurant kitchens to use their love of food and humble ingredients to help others. Whether it's a buzzing food market that brings together cultures and heals divisions, a soup kitchen that uses the simple gift of hospitality to restore the dignity of those in need, or a restaurant kitchen that's become a safe space for refugees. Stay tuned. For our very first episode, we're on a gastronomic world tour from Beirut and Paris to Modena and Lisbon to hear from some of the pioneers who are using food to do much more than just feed. They're blazing the trail when it comes to bringing about social change one dish at a time. Just a heads up, a few parts of this episode contain strong language, so caution is advised. First up, time for lunch. We head to Lisbon with one of this show's producers, journalist Gaia Lutz, who's taking us to Mezze, a bustling Middle Eastern restaurant and one of her favourite spots in the Portuguese capital.
We have also yalanji, which is a vine leaf stuffed with rice and tomato. It has a kind of a pickled taste, and that's because the leaves are pickled. Baba ganoush, which is a smoked aubergine. Hummus, the best in town for sure. I would say the best in Portugal. For dessert, a fantastic baklava. We make it only with pistachios.
That's Mezze's founder, Francisca Gorjão Henriques.
We have a sage, which is a metal plate. They do it with a pillow.
Sounds a bit complicated, but all sage is a thin, large flatbread, usually made from wheat flour and baked over a dome or a metal griddle.
First they do the dough and then small balls, and in seconds the bread pops up and it's delicious.
Delicious indeed, but that's not the only reason we sent Gaia to Mezze.
It's the biggest crisis of its kind in Europe since the aftermath of World War II.
Many refugees risk their lives crossing the Mediterranean to reach Europe, only to be shunned by countries.
Portugal finds itself in a minority of one.
It was impossible not to pay attention to every news piece that was coming to us in 2016, where this project started. Every day we had images of refugees trying to arrive in Europe, many times being pushed away. It was our responsibility to do something to show refugee people that they were welcome in Portugal.
Mezze is more than a restaurant. Since opening in 2016 as an initiative of the NGO Association Pain à Pain, it's relied on the culinary skills of women and men from the Middle East and Africa, Egypt, Syria, and Morocco. These people are refugees turned cooks, often fleeing war, persecution, or economic hardships, coming to Portugal in search of a better life.
Mezze is a second home, and it's a place where people that had to run from the Middle East, from their home countries, can start over. And they not only have a job here, but they also have a place where they can share their own identity with their new community.
Through word of mouth, Mezze soon became known as a safe haven far and wide.
People started to talk about Mezze and about this project where Middle Eastern refugees could find a job. Some people knew about the project when they were still in refugee camps in Turkey and in Greece, which was interesting for us to know because it meant that this was being spoken about outside Portugal. Many people didn't speak a word when they came, but then they started to chat with the clients, and step by step they started to learn some words, and now they are fluent.
One of these newcomers is our waiter for today's lunch, Hamza.
My name is Hamza. I arrived in Portugal in 2018 and I'm working in Mezze. I was looking on internet to see if there is an Arabic community here or some business. The Arab people, they have some works here, to join them, to have some experience in the beginning. Because to work in Portuguese restaurant, it's a bit difficult for the language. And it was luckily that I came to Mezze. I like many things here in Portugal. Of course, there is some things you need to do a lot of effort to reach it. But for general, challenge is the language, to find a job and to get a little bit integrated in the country. It is very nice to work with the people from your culture, and at the same time you meet new people in the restaurant, Portuguese, you speak with them, and you get more experience.
Often, after their tenures at Mezze, staff eventually leave and, equipped with their new skills, head for other jobs around the city. For some, working at Mezze has even opened up the doors to entrepreneurship.
There was an interesting spin-off. One of our waitresses, every time she brought food to the table and she started to explain the plates, some clients asked her, where do you find those ingredients? Is it difficult? Is it easy? And she started to think, okay, maybe it would be a good idea to have a grocery store only with the Middle East ingredients. So her boyfriend and her, they created a Middle Eastern grocery shop, which is 2 doors away, with a Portuguese partner. And it was only because she had this idea, okay, maybe it makes sense to have a grocery shop because people are interested. They want to know where they can buy tahini, pomegranate syrup, and so on.
Noticing how the restaurant opened doors for the people it employed, Francisca decided to give Mezze itself its own spin-off, the Mezze School, which opened earlier this year in Lisbon.
It's a great project for us because in Mezze there's a limit to the jobs we can offer. So we decided to focus on training. It's a training program designed specifically for migrants.
Lessons include financial literacy, a crash course to teach migrants their rights as employees, as well as language and Portuguese culture classes.
In 2017, when we opened Mezze, we didn't know if this was going to be a success or not because there were no Middle East restaurants in Lisbon. And so this was a jump in the dark. But actually, it was a big surprise to see that people loved our food. And also, many people wanted to help the refugees that were coming, and they didn't know how. Coming to Mezze was a very delightful way of doing it because they were not only experiencing a different cuisine, but also they had a sense of helping a social project, and they got to know the people that they saw on the TV and on the news, and suddenly they were real people and they were in front of them.
When a magnitude 6 earthquake struck northern Italy, 10% of the world's supply of Parmigiano came crashing to the ground.
I think it kind of started with an earthquake back in 2012.
That's Lara Gilmore.
An earthquake that occurred in Emilia-Romagna, in Modena, 2 of them. This earthquake which damaged not only homes and structures, but really damaged the production of Parmigiano Reggiano. Something like 450,000 wheels of Parmesan, as they age on these shelves, fell to the ground and the wheels were cracked open.
Lara is the co-founder and president of Food for Soul, a non-profit organisation founded to promote social awareness about food waste, hunger and social inclusion.
I think we realized at that moment we had just been 6 months into our third Michelin star that we had the possibility, with the voice and the following and this recognition, to really make that a pivotal moment where we could show the power of food for social good and for social change.
Not just talking, showing.
And that's the Italian chef Massimo Bottura, Lara's business partner and husband, with whom she started Food for Soul 7 years ago in 2015. Bottura shot to fame as the man behind the kitchen of 3 Michelin star restaurant Osteria Francescana in Modena and the 1 Michelin star Gucci Osteria de Massimo Bottura in Florence, as well as 2 other world-renowned restaurants in Istanbul, Turkey and Beverly Hills in the US. So when the Parmesan was damaged, he stepped up.
Massimo came up with this brilliant idea of creating a recipe that required lots of Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. We work with Slow Food to do a virtual dinner where we encourage people, we told them the story about the damaged cheese and encourage people to buy Parmigiano cheese because that was the best way to ensure that the cheesemakers and the dairy farmers and those who had suffered this loss would have money in their pockets to be able to rebuild.
The pair's initiative to support Parmesan cheesemakers who had lost their income from the earthquake was their first foray into food philanthropy, and soon it became really clear to them that they had more work to do outside their restaurant kitchens.
And so we came up with this kind of crazy, kind of scary, experimental idea. I was terrified. It was a Sunday morning, and he said, I think I know what we need to do during Expo. When Massimo says he's got like an idea going on, I'm the first one who sits down because as soon as he says the idea, it's already happening. It's already going to happen. There's no stopping that train.
That Sunday in 2015, Massimo shared his idea with Lara to create a one-of-a-kind soup kitchen as part of the Milan Expo. The theme was feeding the planet energy for life, and some 147 countries travelled to Milan to take part and celebrate slow food, local agriculture, and healthy eating. Bottura's idea was a refettorio that he named Refettorio Ambrosiano. It was in essence a social initiative around food, set up in an abandoned theatre in one of Milan's most neglected neighbourhoods, Greco. Massimo approached his colleagues, some of Italy's most famous chefs, to transform unsold food waste from supermarkets into delicious meals for people in need. It was a soup kitchen on the surface, but one that did things a little differently. They saw it as more of a cultural project than a charity. It would soon become Lara and Massimo's passion project for the next 7 years and counting.
So Food for Soul began that way. We could have never imagined that today we'd be talking about all these refettorios around the world.
The basic idea of these refettorios, which comes from the Latin phrase to remake or to restore, is to bring emotion and humanity back into the act of sharing food with those in need, hopefully restoring some faith in those it serves.
It's not just about the calories you get or someone giving you a meal. That's a gesture of charity. Not only were people having a delicious 3-course meal cooked by some of the best chefs in the world, but they were being served at the table and asked, how was it? Did you like it? Would you like seconds? And the expression on the face of the guests who were there.
They were like in shock in the beginning.
Every kind of soup kitchen or community kitchen we had seen up to that point wasn't about celebrating anything. It was very much an exchange of objects. So I'm going to give you this food. You have a sandwich. You can eat it. Everything we had done in the past 25 years was all about emotion and transferring emotion.
Food is an act of love. Around the table, you're all equal. You know, you sit, you eat, you talk, you restore your soul. If you think about what is the meaning, the real meaning of the word restaurant, comes from the Latin word reficere, to restore the soul of the people. And cooking or hosting people in a 3 Michelin star or like in a refettorio is exactly the same things.
Their thinking struck a chord because it wasn't just Milan that needed refettorios. Today, Food for Soul have spread their soup kitchens to Rio, London, Paris, Modena, Bologna, Merida, San Francisco, Harlem, Geneva, and Sydney.
Each city has different communities that need to be served.
Even affluent cities have space for a refettorio, and one city in particular stuck with Lara.
Geneva, I found out some incredible, there's many students in Geneva, and a lot of those students are coming from abroad. And the team in Geneva had a list of 1,000 students who are just barely able to get by with their books and the expenses that they have for the rooms they rent. And sometimes they're living on, some kind of very cheap noodles that you make in the microwave.
Yeah,
and so they are going to also be our guests in Geneva. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be great if we could make 2 nights where we have half students and half elderly coming together, 2 different generations, where they can create a whole new energy. It wasn't even just about being able to serve people a meal, but we saw that the neighborhood around this project, it became a cultural hub, it became a community space, it became something that they owned, that they were proud of, that they wanted to share. And we realized that they didn't need the famous chefs there anymore who had left all their incredible recipes. They didn't need Massimo Bottura, Lara Gilmore, because they were the ones who were bringing the refettorio to life and opening the doors every day.
No matter the location, each refettorio works with local chefs who cook using leftover food waste from supermarkets. Using what you've got. That's a philosophy that's been with Massimo all his life. Growing up in Modena, Massimo had a close relationship with his grandmother, who taught him everything about cucina povera, which is a way of cooking that's all about being creative with the few ingredients at hand. Massimo remembers how she would say, use what's in season, buy the right amounts you need, cook with what you have.
Don't leave the table if you don't finish the plate. Don't waste anything. Buy the right amount of the food that you need and you leave in the refrigerator. My experience of going to bed in the evening with a warm cup of milk full of breadcrumbs, a little bit of sugar and a touch of coffee, the left in the mocha, was my favorite meal when I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old.
Our grandmothers and, generations before us, they didn't have the luxury of going to a grocery store where shelves were packed with food. They had to find a way to get the ingredients to feed their families on a very slim budget. And out of that came some of the most incredible recipes from all around the world, whether it's from Portugal or Greece or Italy or South America or Africa. Our traditional recipes are the ones that people made with what they had. So can we go back to that and with the creativity, the quality, the ideas of the chefs and re-propose some of those simple, hearty meals made with not farm to table, the most beautiful ingredients, but what you have available.
Feed the planet. The easiest answer to that amazing, incredible, deep question is fighting food waste.
It's like the 3rd biggest explosion in the world, so it's like huge. The scale of the destruction is like massive and unbelievable.
That's food activist and restaurant owner Kamal Mouzawak. On August 4th, 2020, a catastrophic explosion in Beirut's port killed over 200 people. 3,000 tons of ammonium nitrate exploded, and left the city in ruins.
It's very traumatizing for us, and it's something like never happened before. And for me, it was a turning point in my life. And on August 4th, I said, if in a month's time, there's not a beginning of change, if after all of this, nothing's going to change or start change, it means that nothing will ever, never, ever change. And for me, it's like the end of this country.
Kamal was in Lebanon when the blast happened, and among the many injured were his partner. The explosion was the very last straw in a long list of governmental incompetencies that Kamal had fought with his whole life.
For me, the situation is like having an abusive parent. I understood that I lived with an abusive parent, which is this country, for 52 years, all my life, and I had to fight it all the time. You push this abusive parents once, twice, 12 times, 20 times, and then after 72 times telling him fuck off, and he or she doesn't, fuck off, you have to understand that you have to push him away or you just have to go away.
After the events of August 4th, Kamal decided to relocate to Paris, where he now lives. But he certainly didn't give up on his country. In fact, he's using Lebanese cuisine to help heal divisions and bring his culture closer to people outside the country. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand just how deep Kamal's love of his land and its food goes, we have to venture back some 50 years to when Kamal was a young child.
I'm from a small village in the neighborhood of Beirut, like 20 kilometers out of Beirut, called Shaita. It's very well known for its grottos. So we used to live in a house surrounded by a very small garden, and my uncles used to have bigger gardens. They used to work and produce vegetables and citrus from a bigger garden, and this is where we ate from. But I remember very well, my father taking care of the very small garden every day and doing something and punctuating the year with different things to do all along. Every day had something else to do. I remember eating mostly from, even small garden, but from our own garden. My father couldn't think of, like eating a tabbouleh from a parsley nut grown by him because no, it would have been irrigated by sewage or not clean. My grandfather from my mother's side doing reserves that we call traditionally in Lebanon mouneh for like 5 different houses, his 2 married daughters, his 2 married sons, and himself his own house, like 5 different households.
Mouneh is the traditional Lebanese practice of preserving. Whether that's drying, pickling, or oil packing, different regions in Lebanon are known for their specialties of mouneh. The Baalbek region is known for its eggplant makdou and goat labneh, whereas those from the Hamana are widely regarded as the cherry specialists.
Doing year-long preserves of potato or garlic or onion or olive oil. So all these traditions where food was quite central to our life, because by the end of the day, it's something that we need to do every day to sustain our life, and like not just an activity for foodies to take Instagram pics of.
This was once the richest part of the richest city in the Middle East. Now it's the front line of the war in the Lebanon.
It was a quiet childhood, but the Lebanon outside Kamal's family garden was actually engulfed by a civil war that tore the country apart.
So far, the civil war has taken 17,000 lives. In the latest
The struggle here is not between Christian and Muslims, but against our...
The conflict started when Kamal was just 6, dividing Lebanon on ethno-religious grounds, with some unhappy with the majority Christian leadership. As with most civil wars, things got messy. Over 120,000 people died in the 15-year period, and 1 million people fled the country. For many, the war was a reality, a tragic but normal backdrop to day-to-day life. Until one day in 1990, it ended. In his 20s, Kamal was now free to travel up and down Lebanon, only truly discovering his own country for the first time. Call him young and naive, but something was already crystal clear to him.
why don't we keep our differences aside and look for common grounds? Common grounds are very basically and simply like the real ground itself. We live on the same land that produces the same agriculture, and we do the same cuisine of this agriculture.
Northern Africa and the Middle East are famous for their open-air markets, also known as souks. In many places, a souk is the living heart of a city, where merchants and producers, locals and tourists gather to exchange their heritage and traditions. Except in Kamal's native Lebanon, these sorts of markets weren't a thing when he was growing up. So in 2004, Kamal decided to start the first farmers' market in Lebanon, bringing together small producers from all over the previously segregated country.
It was just an instinct, and I was following something.
He named it Souk El Tayeb. Souk means market, and Tayeb means good in 3 different meanings. Good taste, good person, and the third is the Arabic meaning for the word alive. Through this market, very much alive in sight and smell, small rural farmers from around the country could sell their produce and in turn guarantee their livelihoods.
There is around 100 producers at Souk El Tayeb today, and 100 producers means they are families. So it's like 500 or 600 or more people who are working to have their products every Saturday, mainly at this market, and living from that. Buna al-Dur, Ali, you know, she had her daughter nearly born in Souk El Tayeb, and today her daughter has a son, and it's her daughter who takes care of the stand instead of Buna. So this is what's important, what they do to grow themselves and to grow with their families and their kids.
It also became a platform for cultural exchange, a place where, after 15 years torn apart, Lebanese from all over the country could share food, traditions, and conversation.
It's like an agora in the old days, in the antiquity, you know, where people mingle and mix and talk and buy and eat. So it's about mingling and meeting the other. When you really want to meet or discover a city, I like the word meeting a city, not discovering a city. If you want to move to a different step or level, you have to meet the people, and you cannot meet people unless you go to a farmer's market. It's a way not just to sell vegetables and fruit, it's mainly for human betterment, how each one of these producers and you and me can get out of going to the farmer's market, buying some vegetables, and feel themselves and be better and do better.
Kamal's second endeavour, Taule, built on the idea of the market, an idea that came from visiting the villages where the souk's producers came from.
So we started doing these regional food festivals that we called Food and Feast, and it was, let's say, Tomato Festival in Gaya's village. It's going to be like a small market, historical visits, ecological visit, and at noon we're going to have lunch. So we're not going to eat regular food. We want to eat the typical food of this village. Who does it? It is the woman of this village, the good cooks, you know, the mothers of this village, where each one came with a dish, a typical dish of home-cooked cuisine. So these lunches started to have like a big success, and we said, like, why to stop it now? Why don't we go on a permanent basis, so every day, in a closer or easier destination, which is in Beirut. So this is how, on November 5, 2009, Taule was born in Beirut.
If Souk El Tayeb is a farmer's market, then Taule is a farmer's kitchen, a restaurant in Beirut where women from all over the country can come and cook. These women take turns designing the menu, inspired by their particular region and roots. Kamal's idea of bringing his country together through simple home-cooked food expanded, and he went on to open further Taules in the country, as well as grocery shops and guest houses. With every project, he was championing his land by celebrating its most faithful guardians, the producers and cooks.
We forget this all the time. Hospitality starts and is at home and not at all in a restaurant or in a hotel.
And then it happened. The event that shook not only Kamal's world, but the whole of Beirut and Lebanon. Almost overnight, businesses were destroyed, including extensive damage to Souk El Tayeb, the market Kamal spent decades building. After the blast, he and his team set up an emergency community kitchen to feed Beirut's residents, hospital staff, and rescue workers. And with the help of donations, they rebuilt a space across from the port to run the market and one outpost of the restaurant, as well as a permanent community kitchen that serves 2,000 meals per day. After that, Kamal decided it was time to move, taking the core values of Taule and, of course, a piece of Lebanon with him.
It was like, okay, now it's time to take Taule. We cannot take the farmer's market. It's more difficult to take the bait. Maybe the easiest thing would be to take our grocery shops that we call the kene. And instead of taking the kene alone, we need a kitchen, because the basis of what we do is the kitchen itself, so it's Taule. So maybe now it's time to go and start doing a Taule elsewhere.
Taule Paris is a small restaurant located in the 11th arrondissement, which opened in January 2022. The feeling is, like every other Taule, that of being at home. A communal table sits by a large window facing the street, and in typical Parisian people-watching style, lunch is accompanied by a scene of fashionable passers-by. Inside, behind the table, a buffet of regional Lebanese home-cooked food serves up dishes like hara osbao, lentils with pasta and pomegranate molasses, a dish that literally means he burnt his finger, a nod to the idea that it's so delicious, people would rather burn their fingers and start eating than wait for it to cool down. In the kitchen, sticking true to the spirit of Taule, women from around Lebanon and people from across the Middle East serve up the food, alongside a French cook. Once a month, a guest chef joins from Beirut to cook her regional cuisine for a few days.
For me, Paris was always a shelter in a way, and it was always like a therapy. Whenever I used to come to Paris, I used to leave crying. Today, it is a safe haven for me, and I'm grateful with every single press. I don't know if we are successful or not. It's not for me to decide, but I know that we're going on. First of all, it's about stubbornness and to just go on. Life is a constant change, so you always need to accept, adapt, and create something new. Food is inclusive and not exclusive. We have to redefine what profit is. Profit, as we see today only in dollar sign, is completely useless. Profit is first of all me, it is the others, it is all creatures, animals and plants, and it's the environment itself.
It's incredible because it really gave me the sense that people are much, much stronger than you can possibly imagine. Food is one of the things that creates more empathy between people. When you put food on a table, it's like a gift to someone.
For us, it was a small demonstration of just how powerful, when you bring people together around a meal, you can really demonstrate how easy it is to change things.
Now is a movement, is a real movement. It's no more about a project, a foundation. No, it's a worldwide big movement.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Common Ground, a podcast brought to you by placemaking and marketing agency Toposophy. It was developed and produced by the Greek Podcast Project, with production assistance from Gaia Lutz. I'm your host, Daphne Karnizis. Please send us any thoughts, feedback, or suggestions to info@toposophy.com or get in touch on social media. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and please leave us a review if you enjoyed this, because it will help even more people find us. On our next episode,
if Kyoto can figure out how to save its matcha, then maybe that example can help other cities figure out how to save theirs. When you're preserving the traditional crafts. You're also saving the people who are putting the clay on the walls. You're preserving the work of people who weave the tatami mats.
How can we reuse our architectural heritage and breathe life back into abandoned buildings? We head to Japan to find out how Kyoto is finally restoring its prized townhouses, the machiya, and to the UK, where we speak to a charity that rescues historic buildings and makes them available for holiday rentals to you and me. Sleep over in an old church, anyone?